Well, hello. I am so excited to be here. Thank you guys for welcoming me. Some of you even, I used to teach a class here and I still do, but it's live streamed now because of the time difference. But I miss being in this church. I miss being with you guys. So it was a real treat. And thank you, Pastor Avery, for the invitation, giving me this chance to come back and to speak to everybody. I'd like to do you a favor. But for me to do you a favor, I need your help. I need you to agree to open your mind and let me come into it for a little bit of time. Now, this isn't going to be one of them creepy things like you see on TV, so don't worry about that. What I mean is just for you to consider thinking through some things with me over the next 30 minutes. And if you'll do that, I think it will enable me to do you a favor. Because I want us to think about some things that a lot of times we don't think about. There are a lot of people who believe in God but don't really think about why they believe in God. There are a lot of people who don't believe in God and don't really think about why. And there are a lot of people who are just ambivalent on the subject. Maybe there's a God, maybe not. We can never know. And so I'll worry more and I'll think more about things I can control, like what I'm going to eat for lunch today. And I want anybody anywhere along that spectrum to just give me now 28 minutes of your brain so that I can traipse inside. I promise to try not to make a mess. But what I want to do is I want to make you think about some things that we need to think about. And in that regard, I've got my PowerPoint somewhere. Is my PowerPoint somewhere? There's my PowerPoint. You are going to get a book today, if you want it, entitled Atheism On Trial. It's just been published by InterVarsity Press. And by the good grace of so many people in this church, and by that I mean our one church in many campuses, a copy has been secured for you. And if you want it for free, you get it for free. If you want to pay something towards it to help the church with the cost, then please pay something for it. But we don't charge for giving out information about God. We're glad to give it. Moses, when they came down from Mount Sinai, with the Ten Commandments, he did not charge people a shekel and a half to look at them. 2.5 shekels if you wanted to touch them. Jesus did not charge admission to the Sermon on the Mount. Heaven forbid, if you are interested in reading about our God, we're not going to charge you for it. Those of you who choose and want to help defray the cost, God bless you. But feel no obligation. Just don't take it free and sell it on eBay. Because you can't get more than a dime for it anyway. This is one of a trilogy of books. The first book that I published was entitled, with InterVarsity Press, was entitled Christianity on Trial. I've got a third one. I've just sent the manuscript out. It's supposed to come out next year, and I'm not sure what we'll entitle it, but it'll be something like More Stuff on Trial. I think technically it's World Religions on Trial. But I want right now to introduce you to this book because I want to talk you into something. I'd love, regardless of where you are, I'd love to convince you today that God is real, that He knows your name, and that He desires to be in an incredible relationship with you that will give you dignity and worth and value, that will help clean up the muck and the mess you've made with your life. And that is all true, but if I can't get you there today, I would at least like to introduce you to my book and get you to read it. So shake hands with it, take it with you, and let me tell you a little bit about what I say in there to maybe entice you to read the book. So if I get inside your brain, do you know one of the things I'm going to find? I'm going to find that you are hardwired for truth. It's just part of your makeup. You can't run from that. You like things that are true and things that are real. You search for real friends. You don't search for fake ones. You want to eat real food, not that vegan junk my son eats. You want reality. There's a reason reality TV is so popular, even though it's the furthest thing from reality. But we're all desperately seeking truth because our brains are hardwired for truth. And when we find truth, we grab hold of it. Any of you ever been called to jury duty? A bunch of you. Any of you ever served on one of my juries? If you do, vote for me. No, you don't do that. You vote for what's right. See, the American court system, where I live and breathe, is based on truth. In fact, more than any other civilization in the history of the human race, the American court system has become the very best system for determining truth in certain aspects of this world. And we've refined it. And one of the key refinements that we've put into place is an impartial jury. See, a jury cannot be partial people with tilted scales. A jury's got to say, I'll look at the scales and I'll look at the evidence and I'll decide what's right. And so as we put atheism on trial, and I do it as a lawyer, I do it with the question that I have every day that I walk into court. The last case I tried was last October, November, December. I don't know that it ran into December. I think it did some. But it was in Cleveland, Ohio. And it was the first jury trial in the country on the issue of opioids. There was a lot of press there, and it was all built up in the press, and everybody's watching because there are 30,000 of these lawsuits pending, and everybody wanted to know who would win the first one, and it was against Walgreens, CVS, and Walmart. By the way, if you work for them, do not hate me. Just set that aside for a moment. But the big issue is the reporters and everybody were asking me about the case is, can you prove it? Can you prove your case? I go into court to prove my case. And my answer was yes. And it's the same answer that I would give you if you asked me, can you really prove there's a God? I think so. I'm not saying that there's not faith involved, but I'm telling you, I believe there's a God because the proof to me is overwhelming. And I think if you'll let me climb inside your brain and shine a couple of flashlights around in there, you'll see inside your brain evidence of the same truth, the same proof that there is a God. So if I'm getting inside your brain and I want to show you that, the first thing I got to do is talk to you about what proof is, and I'm going to talk about that. The second thing I want to do is talk to you about various options, because if one thing is true, something else is not true. If something else is true, then maybe one thing's not true. We need to look at options. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the evidence is. So if you'll work with me on those 3 points, the first one is, what is proof? Now, when I was in 10th grade, I had Miss Bodie as a teacher. Miss Bodie taught me geometry. Geometry was an interesting class because she would teach us how to take a theory or a theorem and how to develop the proof of that theorem. And you could do that. There is such a thing as mathematical proof, where you can take mathematics and prove something to be true. Let me give you a simple example. If I tell you that 2 plus 4 equals 6, one way to prove that is to take 6 and subtract 2 and see if you have 4 left. And that proves it. If you want to know if you have COVID, you can take a COVID test. Now, it doesn't prove it 100%, but it's about 90, 95%, maybe 98% accurate. And I should know I've had COVID twice. I collect COVID variations the way some old ladies collect souvenir plates from truck stops. If you want to know and you want to prove that you've got the right amount of flour to add to a cake you're making, you can use a measuring cup. And the measuring cup will prove how much flour you have. You don't have to eyeball it. You don't have to say, it looks like a cup and a half to me. You can measure it. If you want to know how hot or how cold it is outside, and you want to prove it, do you know a good way to prove it? Use a thermometer. Thermometer's pretty good at proving it, assuming the thermometer's working right. All of these are different ways to prove different things. But if I wanted to prove to you something that I have to prove quite often in court, if I wanted to prove to you something about, I tried in 2005 the nation's first Vioxx case. Vioxx is a COX-2 inhibitor, which means that it inhibits the body's expression of cyclooxygenase 2. That's technical speak for it's a pain reliever. A non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. With one big drawback. It will kill you of a heart attack 6 times quicker than if you take Advil. And so I represented the widow, Carol Ernst, whose husband, Bob Ernst, had died of a heart attack. Now, some people, like me at various times in my life, seem to be one pork chop away from a heart attack. Not so Bob Ernst. This fellow was a triathlete. He ate fish. He was a healthy fella. Took it for hand pain. Died in his sleep of a heart attack. And in the court, one of the things I had to prove for Carol Ernst to recover is that she loved her husband. I have to prove it. Because one of the things the jury does is they assess how much are her damages from this. And if she didn't love her husband, she doesn't have a lot of damage. Some people might say she owes Mark. So how do I prove that? I cannot take a thermometer and prove that you love someone, even though a thermometer is quite good at the weather. So what is proof? We learned it in law school, and it's used every day in courts all around the United States of America. What is proof? A judge will tell you, if you make a jury in a civil case, that proof is the greater weight of credible evidence. So you take the evidence and you put it in the scales. So here we've got the scales. Let's see. What color shall love be? We're going to make love blue because it's the color of my wife's eyes. I know the color of her eyes. That might be a sign I love her. I know the color she dyes her hair. That might mean I love her. I know what makes her laugh, and I love to give her gifts, and I love to do things that surprise her and make her happy. And I love that we have children together, and I love the way she takes care of those children, and I try to help. And I love, and I love, and I love. Now, I got to tell you, sometimes it may not look like it. And sometimes I'm quite selfish. And sometimes I'm a little short-tempered. And sometimes I'm not so patient. But I do apologize. And I do try really hard. And we put the evidence in the scales. And when we're through putting the evidence in the scales, we decide what has the greater weight of credible evidence. And that, my friend, is the way you prove if someone loves another. That's the way you prove who ran the red light. That's the way you prove. Look, I used this in 2019 to prove that Johnson & Johnson baby powder that's talc-based had asbestos in it and had caused ovarian cancer to 22 women. And that case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, with the Court of Appeals on the way writing about how overwhelming the proof was. And as a result, you cannot buy that kind of baby powder from Johnson & Johnson anymore. They quit selling it in the United States and Canada. Now it's cornstarch based and quite safe. But this is used all the time because this is how we prove things that cannot be proven by mathematics, by thermometers, by measuring cups. So when I talk about proving the existence of God, I'm saying, what is the greater weight of credible evidence? Now, in law school, if you took an evidence class, let's make sure I'm okay time-wise. If you took an evidence class, one of the first things that you would learn is that there are two kinds of evidence. One is direct evidence. That would be like, I have evidence it's raining outside because I went outside and I looked and it was raining. That's direct evidence. Or I have evidence that Johnny shot Billy Bob with a gun because I saw Johnny with a gun shoot Billy Bob. That's direct evidence. Then there is circumstantial evidence. And that's evidence that's based upon circumstances. Now, it's important. A judge will instruct a jury. Circumstantial evidence is just as powerful as direct evidence. Let me give you two examples. I may not have seen it rain outside, but I know the forecast called for rain, and I heard thunder, and I heard patter, 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 patter on the roof and windows. And I saw people coming in from outside wearing raincoats that were soaked with their umbrellas wet as they fixed their umbrellas. Now, that's not direct evidence it's raining. I didn't see it raining, but that's circumstantial evidence from which a reasonable person may conclude it's raining. Most murders are not tried with direct evidence. I saw John shoot Billy Bob. most of them are tried on circumstantial evidence. Motive, opportunity, fingerprints on the weapon, time and place. You can add it all up, and the circumstances may be the only kind of proof there is. Well, I say this because I think there's both direct evidence of God, but I want to talk especially about the circumstantial evidence. And I at least want you to consider this as we look at two different options. These are two competing views of reality. What's real? What's truly real in this world? I mean, René Descartes is famous for cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Because he said, if I'm going to figure out what's real, one thing I know is real is me. I'm thinking. I got to be real. You all may be some fake illusion. I may be dreaming about all of you. But I'm real. And that's where he started trying to figure out what's real. There's an Oxford fellow named Nick Bostrom who's real popular right now. And about 15 or 20 years ago, he came up with a theory that none of us are real. That we're all a computer simulation. That sometime in the future, computers get to be so good that someone's able to design algorithms or little programs within the computer that self-aware believe they're real. And he says, how do we know that we're not just that? And somebody's running us as a program to see whether or not Putin might explode nuclear bombs and to see how people might react. Now you say that's far-fetched, except I'll tell you that a poll indicated 25% of the Oxford philosophical academia elite think that it may be true. So there are some competing views of reality. What's real? I want to talk about two options. One option, there's no God. Option number two, there's a God. Now, there are certain logical things that are true under either of these scenarios. Let's look at if there's no God. If there is no God, do you know what you are? You and I are sacks of chemicals. Somehow through our skin and a few other things, the molecules in our body are sharing atoms in such a way that they're sticking together. And we are a bunch of chemicals. You got a lot of carbon, got some hydrogen, got some oxygen, got some potassium. You actually have a very, 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 very little bit of gold. Not just like in your teeth, I mean like gold. You are a sack of chemicals. If there's no God, what's happened is somehow this cosmic stardust has exploded in such a way that ultimately some oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen and carbon and calcium and phosphorus and sulfur and potassium and sodium and chlorine and magnesium have all congealed together with an appropriate lightning zap at the right minute so that you have electrical and chemical reactions going on, but all you are is a sack of chemicals. Now, I had a banana yesterday. It's a sack of chemicals too. But your sack of chemicals and mine have some unusual chemical reactions compared to a banana. Some of those chemicals interact in a way that give us awareness that we exist, consciousness. But if there's no God, we're cosmic stardust that just happens because of some bizarro chemical chance to realize that it's stardust. So you're a sack of chemicals, those chemicals interact. Now, assuming you're not a vegan, which some of you may be, if so, God bless you. Like I say, my son is. But I think most people agree, even vegans agree, that we've got to recognize that our sack of chemical and electrical interactions differ from other animals. There's a reason we're okay eating bevo, but not grandma. We see bevo as a cow, ready to be our fajitas for lunch. We see grandma as something different. I hope. Most of us. There is a passage in the Old Testament prophet, I think it's Hosea, who calls these women in Israel cows of Bashan, but we won't go there. Our sack differs in some way from others. Can't say one's better than the other, because if this is who we are, there is nothing that exists to make something right or wrong. Right and wrong are made up words. I mean, how do you say, well, it's wrong for that sack of chemicals to do that? I mean, it's just a sack of chemicals. B.F. Skinner wrote a bestseller entitled Beyond Freedom and Dignity in the 1960s. And what he said is that all you are is a sack of chemicals. You're just reacting. There's no good, there's no bad. You've been shaped by your DNA that gave you the chemicals and by the environment, the ways you interact with other chemicals. But you've got no choice in the matter. So there's no freedom of choice. There's no dignity in a human being. And you take away God, and there really isn't. You cannot say, well, that's bad. What's bad? We live in a world of sacks of chemicals. There's no moral judgment to be made. You might say, well, my sack of chemicals doesn't really like you doing that. Well, Lottie, whoop-de-doo-dah. So, tell your little sack of chemicals to get over it. Because my little sack of chemicals will do whatever my sack of chemicals wants. And yet we know that's not true. You see, the key to this is you can believe these things, but you cannot live consistent with that view. There's not a human being I have ever found who can live consistent with a worldview there is no God. I love our little puppy dog, Tizzy. And I can't get inside her mind. Heaven knows if I could, she would use the bathroom outside. But our little Tizzy came across a huge dog. And Tizzy must think internally she's an elephant or something, because this little short mouse-sized dog that we own was going to devour this horse-sized dog she came across. Now, Tizzy can think she's a massive, huge dog all she wants, but the truth is, she's that little rat-sized dog. You might think that you're a human sack of chemicals. You might think there's no God. You might think that, but just thinking it doesn't make it true. And your life will show you that's not really true. Your brain, if you shine the mag light, the flashlight in there, will show you it's not true. Because I think inside your brain, you recognize the basic Christian teaching of reality. And that is that there is outside of this universe who enters into this universe, yes, but outside of the universe, there is an infinite and a personal and a moral God. And this God is infinite because this God reaches beyond any boundary, including time. Reaches back, reaches forward, infinite in reach. This is a God who is personal, not a supercomputer. This is a God who knows your name, who wants to relate, who wants to be in a fellowship with you. This is a God who is moral, who has moral, ethical attributes. And so we can say this is good, this is bad, because we define good and bad by that God. And so the worldview, the reality view of Christianity is an infinite, personal, and moral God who made you and I, me, in His image. That means I'm hardwired with personality. Oh, some have more than others. But we've all been hardwired with personhood. We're hardwired to understand morality. We are not infinite, we are finite. But within those realms, we are hardwired in God's image. What's more is we were created to be in a relationship with Him. We were created to be loved by the greatest lover of all time. Unconditional love that seeks us out, that will go to the greatest of lengths to forgive us and to teach us to grow in ways that give us a fruitful and meaningful life. And we're hardwired to desire that. We're hardwired to seek for that. We're hardwired to be in a relationship with Him, but we're also recognizing and cognizant of the fact that we don't measure up to moral perfection. And so we get near that idea of God, and some find Him repugnant because He's so perfect. Some find Him unreachable because He's so perfect. Some find themselves overly grand on themselves and thinking that they measure up. But in reality, we know we don't. We all suffer from some deep inferiority. Even the biggest megalomaniacs, who may be the politicians running the big countries of the world, or the CEOs running the big companies of the world, even the biggest of egos, is covering up some inferiority. Because we don't measure up. But the Christian message is that God has restored that relationship. Now, I want to tell you, I believe if we shine that flashlight in our brain, we're going to find that we are hardwired to the reality that there is a God. And we can only live consistent with that. And so I invite you to take the book, and I invite you to go on a journey with me, and I invite you to look at the evidence with me, because that's what I do in the book. In the book, I look at it under this guise of double vision. Our view of reality should align perfectly with how we're able to live. My mom's got a friend named Carol. Carol got sick as a dog. She had a fever. She lost her sense of smell. She lost her sense of taste. She had trouble breathing. Flu-like symptoms. In fact, had just about every COVID symptom there was. She went and got a COVID test. Do you know what? She had COVID. Unless you ask her. No, COVID's made up by the media. Well, Carol, you have every symptom and a positive test. Well, that doesn't mean anything. I don't have COVID. It's made up. Okay. You realize that you're thinking things that are shown by your life to be false. We need to align those things. We need to ask questions. Why am I hardwired to think justice and fairness is so important? Who hardwired me that way? I mean, it's not something I learned. We have 8 grandchildren, 1 on the way, 8 and a half. Actually, 8 7/9. 2 months from now, we'll have our 9th, God willing. And do you know what they're able to do at a very young age? At a very young age, they recognize it's not fair. Because we're hardwired to think things should be fair. We are hardwired to believe that people have a unique value. Sharks may eat fish, fish may eat fish, but we don't eat grandma. And it's not because I don't have time. But I mean, it's a good source of protein. Grandma died. Come on over. We're going to have a barbecue. She was a thrifty woman, wouldn't want her body to go to waste. Don't turn the jets up too high on the old, furnace blasting there. Anyway. Why do people seek meaning and significance in life? Are we just deluded? Or are we hardwired to want to dream the impossible dream and fight the unbeatable foe? Do our troops who put their lives on the lines, our police officers and others who put their lives on the line for community and safety, is there any value in that? Or are they just stupid? These issues of evidence include things that people argue against, like, why is there suffering? Why can't I see God? Why do so many prayers seem unanswered? How do I mesh God with science? All of that is part of seeking the truth. And that's what I try and do. And I want you to read the book. I urge you to read the book. Because I examine each of these arguments and I put them in the scales. And then I ask you that question. What is proven and what's not? Which worldview accounts best for the evidence that we have around us?
Thank you for joining us online. We hope today's experience encouraged and challenged you. At Champion Forest, we are passionate about all kinds of people coming to know God, to grow in their relationship with Him and others, and then to go out and make a difference in the world. We would love the opportunity to talk and pray with you. To connect with us, just go to championforest.org/connect. And hey, of course, we can't wait to welcome you on campus in person on one of our locations. We'll see you soon.